Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be doing three things to my M119 and my SL500. One we'll be doing is changing out the camshaft oiler tubes. This only affects sort of the later M119s. They switched from metal tubes to plastic ones, which are prone to popping, and they're often a source of ticking noises at startup, especially cold startups. My car, despite having 240,000 miles, does not make that sound, but I thought I would change that part anyways. As for getting that part, it is kind of difficult. Your best option is most likely getting the OEM part from a junkyard, get into an old 124 or an old 129, old 140, and taking out those camshaft oiler tubes. I only believe that 91 through 95 cars have it. 95 actually might be the year they changed it. Can't remember for sure. I'll put a little right in the description to verify that. But getting an OEM one's probably your best bet in terms of quality. There were some eBay ones selling for quite a while that you can get for about $200 a set, which is probably your best deal as well. I've had multiple people tell me those are the best deals, best quality as well. As long as you use OEM O-rings, you're pretty much all set. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't even find that set anymore because they seem to be out of production, or the price is actually more than an OEM set. So that didn't make much sense to me. There's one other brand that makes them, also very expensive. But I ended up buying a set of Euro ones, the brand Euro. Now, Euro doesn't exactly have the best reputation in terms of quality. I usually avoid them at all costs. However, in this case, I've had a few people use them, and they said as long as you kind of go over them and make sure there's no metal burrs on them, which quite honestly is ridiculous for a brand new part, you're pretty much fine to use them. So what it is, I got a set of Euro camshaft oiler tubes, 119. I want to say you need 32 of them, or was it 16? It's early in the morning. I don't know which one it was, but I'll write whatever it was. Of those tubes, I want to say it was 16 tubes, and it still cost me around $350. So not a cheap thing, even for a questionable quality part. But no doubt it'll be better than the plastic ones currently in there. At least I believe they're plastic. Some people have told me that a good chance it might have already been changed because it doesn't make any noises, but I wouldn't be surprised. You can still buy the plastic ones from Mercedes and replace them as such, but I'm not sure why you even bother doing that, honestly, because they are also expensive. So, we'll be changing those today. That's the primary reasons for me taking off the valve covers. Secondly, we'll also be doing the timing chain guides. The plastic timing chain guides at the top of each bank. There's a two-part sort of mechanism that hooks together. That is an Achilles heel of pretty much any M119. With questionable design, overall this engine is relatively problem-free, especially the later ones. The early ones have their charm, of course, but the later ones, they really do refine things and remove some of the problem spots. But these timing chain guides affect all M119s, to my knowledge. So they can kind of fall apart. They can actually blow motors because of this. So we'll definitely be changing those. I have no idea if they're original or not, so we'll find out soon. But definitely worth changing those. And of course, my valve covers are absolutely just leaking oil everywhere, so we'll be changing those as well. Alrighty, so first thing I gotta do is take off the air box, which is super easy in these cars. If you've never done it before, there's usually two nuts at the very back that kind of hold this whole assembly in place. My car actually doesn't have the nuts, it just kind of sits in place, so we'll just be taking off. These are the intake hoses, the front cover, and of course the air box will come off. Also, I want to mention that on some cars, especially W210 E-Class and W124 E-Class, the back valve cover bolts might be a bit hard to get to. I definitely recommend a swivel socket. On the SL, it's super easy. This engine was designed for this engine base, so it's pretty easy to access. W140 should be pretty much the same deal. So just keep that in mind, but overall, you should be pretty much all set to start going. I'm going to put the hood in service position, one of my favorite Mercedes features, and we'll get this party started. So as we can see, my engine bay is pretty dirty. I still haven't cleaned it since buying the car, which I figured there was no point considering how oily everything is. In fact, you can actually see oil visibly dripping from the side of the valve cover, which is no good, but we'll be changing that today. First thing I gotta do is just disconnect some hoses, some air hoses and whatnot. So on this side of the car, on the passenger side in my case, there's just this one hose which should kind of loosely come apart, kind of like that. You can put that to the side. And then on this side over here, there's some more hoses to deal with. There's one that goes to the valve cover. There's also the fuel line that goes over there. But we'll probably leave that in place. I'm trying to avoid touching fuel lines and, of course, making that a big mess. But I might have to. We'll see. First things first, we have to take off the covers for the coils, and of course remove the grounding and all the wiring harnesses from there. Very tidy engine bay overall. I really like how they kind of hid wiring and stuff. Very well done, better than most new cars, even new Mercedes. I was just working on M156 for quite a while, and it's a mess in comparison. So typically you're gonna have like some E10, eTorx 10 bolts over there, but in my car I have a weird combination of 5mm and 10 mils, but on this side it's normal with just eTorx 10, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. We'll probably change that on later on, but yeah, let me take that cover off. There we go. You know, all things considered, it's pretty clean down there. Let's take off the coil packs now, taking off the ground. Now don't be like me. I'm using a 7mm hex, but for eTorx, to prevent rounding them off, you definitely want to use the proper eTorx sockets. Now, in my case, I just don't have an eTorx set here in my apartment, but you definitely want to do that. Luckily, these bolts are all pretty low torque, especially for that ground, so it's not really a big deal. You're not going to risk rounding it at all, but definitely keep that in mind. I should also mention I'll be doing spark plugs today, because why not? We're taking the coils off anyways. Took the first coil out, just cleaned it off a bit, but it was pretty oily, so that's pretty indicative of a leaking valve cover gasket at the spark plug seals. So I'm very curious how these spark plugs are going to look. It definitely will be interesting, so I'm glad we're doing this. Finally, we can actually take the valve cover off. Now, pretty much every 5mm Allen bolt which holds this thing in is visible, which is fantastic. So we can be doing that. We might need some extensions for the back ones, but I don't think we'll even need a swivel socket. Now, I might eat my words because I don't have one, but hopefully we won't need one. This should be pretty quick. Definitely one of the easiest cars to work on, that at least I own. This and my 530i are both super easy. This era of car, man. Anyways. Keep in mind there are some little copper washers you're going to want to change out. Forgot to mention that, but I do have a new set of those for both sides. Because it's a good chance they won't actually seal without those new washers. I'm going to also put some blue Loctite on each of the bolts when I put them back in, after clean them of course, because they are quite oily, which should be telling us what to expect. It also looks like all my spark plug tubes are just full of oil, which, that's great. Alright, let's take this thing off. There's also one abnormally long bolt, which of course I didn't keep track of where it goes, but I want to say it was this one. In the top corner, front corner. I'll double check that before continuing. Can verify on that side, of course. Okay. There we go. My gasket is completely hardened. It's not doing a single thing other than make a mess. So guys, with the valve covers off, I'm really happy right now because first of all, things are really clean for a 240,000 mile car. Also, the cams show almost zero wear whatsoever. And of course we do still have the plastic oiler tubes as I suspected, which is totally fine. Very curious if these cams are ever changed or not. I have no record of it, but they look incredible. I think they look honestly even better than my M156 cams out of the ML63, which I tore down about a couple weeks ago. Which is crazy because those ones already look really good. So I'm super happy with this. It sort of makes me feel better about this purchase. This SL's been nothing but great so far, so hoping to only expand upon that. So for the oiler tubes, you have to basically remove the cam caps, not completely. You kind of have to do this one at a time as well. Usually at the best practice to loosen one cam cap altogether, because you're removing some tension off the cam. So we don't always want to do that, but I've seen multiple people do this. It seems to be the best and most efficient way of doing this. You basically take off the inner bolts for the cam caps. You loosen the outer ones this way you can rotate the cam cap just a little bit, because the oiler tubes have some tabs on them that cannot be accessed without removing or at least relieving pressure off those cam caps. So we're doing those one at a time. The only exceptions to this are the cam oiler tubes at the very back, which I'll show you over there. Those ones actually have nothing holding them down, so I can pretty much just pick that guy off as long as the O-rings release. And also the front ones, which actually have some more bolts in the way. You have to remove the timing chain guide to get those ones out, which is fine because we'll be changing those. So all pretty easy. I'm very glad we'll be doing this now, and this should hopefully be a straightforward process. I'm going to show you guys how I do this bank pretty quickly. In terms of torque, for torquing down all of the cam caps, it's pretty much just 11 Newton meters per bolt, which I don't even have a torque wrench that goes down that low. I was watching the video as well on this. I remember from the ML as well when I was doing that just now, it was like 18 Newton meters, which is even more. I used a torque wrench with that, and that was almost zero pressure. So I'm just going to do it by hand, and basically I'm going to feel what's snug and kind of go around in a crisscross pattern all the way through, and do it multiple times very gently to make sure all the cams are tightened as they should be, which should not be an issue at all. So we'll be doing that at the very end once we have all of the oiler tubes replaced, and of course the timing chain guide replaced. We should be good to go. One thing to keep in mind is be very careful with that timing chain guide, because it's plastic, it could be very brittle, and if our valve covers need to go by, it's going to be a mess. In fact, what I might do is stuff some shop towels or microfibers kind of down there to make sure nothing falls in there, and then gently you can kind of pry it apart once you remove those bolts. So it'll be pretty straightforward when we get there, but definitely something to keep in mind of. Alright, so here's an example of what of the metal oiler tubes looks like. This should not be a problem ever again, thankfully. So what I did is when I got these Euro tubes is I took a file and just sort of filed any burrs I saw in there and cleaned them all really nicely and put some new OEM O-rings on. And they do come with their own O-rings, but I don't trust them, so here we are. And also I was wrong about not having to remove the cam caps in the back. You still do, so we'll have to do that anyways. I think I might start in the middle just to relieve pressure off the cams off the middle and kind of make it somewhat organized, so we'll be doing that. But yeah, pay attention to which side is which. They are directional. Not sure if it matters, but I'll just stick with what Mercedes did. So we'll be doing that now. It's pretty much all 11 millimeter bolts all the way through, and let's get started. So make sure the washer comes too. Taking your time is definitely going to be your friend with this. Lift that up a little bit. Lift this up a little bit. Take you out. There we go. Okay. Metal oiler goes in. Plops right in like that. Perfect. Move on to the next one, which is right over here. That's a fight. All these O-rings have totally flattened. And you definitely want to put some tension on the bolts when you put them back in, because if you have no tension on any of the bolts, the caps could pop out. And you definitely don't want that because your time will be all screwed up, which is no fun. Alright, first two down. We got some more to go. Yeah, this back corner is a little tricky, but with a 1/4 inch, you should be fine. Alrighty, now last of all for this bank is going to be the one hidden by the timing chain guide. So we'll undo that one first. It's just basically 5mm for the two timing chain guide bolts, and then the same 11 millimeters for the caps. Now there actually are additional bolts, so instead of just having two on either end, there's actually a set of two over there. I'm just going to loosen those. I don't think we can remove those, we'll find out soon. Just loosening should be enough. This is your variable valve time for the intake on the M119. Also keep in mind that it's actually different part numbers for 1/2 of the timing chain guide on both sides. So both banks are not identical. They have different part numbers for, I think it's either the outer piece. I think the inner piece is the same on both. It's the outer piece that is actually different. Outer piece referring to the one that actually faces the camshaft. So make sure you get the part numbers correct. I'll put some links in the description as usual. We'll go from there. Look at that, broke straight off. Yeah, these things pretty much have shattered. Yeah, definitely put some towels on here. I can see there's some plastic fragments, so just be very, very careful. Here's a closer look comparing the plastic camshaft oiler tube to the metal one. Pretty much the same design, just one's aluminum and one's plastic. I'm not sure if these plastic ones were made in 2021. I wouldn't be surprised though, because they do seem to be in pretty good shape. So they may have been replaced, who knows. And then for the very last one, once the timing chain guide is off, obviously, instead of removing any bolts, just loosened all 8 of these essentially so that they can move up and down a bit. And that's enough to get this guy out, to get some play, as you can see. Just pop the new one in, tighten it up, and it's time to sort of tighten down all of the camshaft caps again before we put the new timing chain guide on, clean up the surface, and new valve cover gaskets. Was just inspecting my old versus new timing chain guide. This is OEM from Mercedes. I didn't realize that unfortunately there's actually a seal, this little rubber seal, this little square seal up top there. Has to be transferred over from the old one to the new one. Now, you probably should just buy a new one. I didn't know you had to. There's the part number if that helps anybody. So probably should change that seal. It can't be too expensive, although knowing it's a Mercedes and it's an old engine, it could be for some reason. Simply change that over if you didn't already buy a new one like I didn't. No one had mentioned this before, so I think maybe they used to come with that pre-installed. I don't know, but definitely transfer it over, and now we're ready to put this back in the car. Also, the 2 part numbers, basically one of them has 03 in it. 03 is for the passenger side and 02 is for the driver's side. I just matched up with whichever one I have there, and the other pieces are identical on both sides, so we should be all set to put this back in. Alrighty, once you have the bigger piece sort of in place, you can just kind of slide this guy in. Kind of sit in a spot like that. Snap them together. Make sure the bottom part's snapped as well. You can kind of feel by grabbing in there. You'll notice it's snapped in, and now you can put the screws back in. Alrighty guys, you can see we have our new oiler tubes all the way up and down, our new timing chain guide in place. I also cleaned up all the mating surfaces with some brake cleaner and some shop towels. And now all we gotta do is change the spark plugs and also the gaskets and clean up the valve cover as well. And then we pretty much will be good to go in terms of putting things back together. Some people do use RTV, it looks like, in the crevices over here. But WIS does not seem to mention that, so I'm not gonna do that. WIS is the dealer software, by the way, for all the dealer workshop manuals. Some people I've noticed put, you can see in the old cover, they put some RTV in the half moons, sort of where the VVT meets the block, or the cylinder head at least. It is pretty similar to what is the procedure in my 530i with the M54 inline 6. But in this case, I don't think I'll need to do that. I think they only did that because the valve covers probably came off at some point. So I'm just gonna throw them on and hope for the best. So just gonna do that. I'm probably do the spark plugs right now because might as well. It's just a 5/8 inch socket, probably a spark plug socket is best. We'll do those real quick and then we'll put the covers back on. And then I will pretty much rinse and repeat for this side. But that pretty much concludes most of the procedure for this video. But I'll put things back together and let you guys know how it goes. You also want to change these 2 fittings as well. They're on the right side of the car, or the passenger side, the US of course. Here are the part numbers over here. 2 little rubbery plasticky pieces. One end goes on the valve cover over here. It's for the CCV or PCV system. This thing is just totally hardened plastic at this point and not doing its job. This is actually a new piece, put this back on there. If we go to the actual cylinder head, you can see the other half of that down in there. We're gonna pry that thing out and hopefully not break it. And then we can put the new ones in and the valve cover can go back on. Here's the old one, completely hardened, actually contains part of the other piece inside, which we have to extract now from the head. Shouldn't be too bad though. All right, so here are the remnants of that piece. You definitely got to scoop all that stuff out when you pull that piece out because all of those fragments end up in the head, which is not what you want, so you kind of got to scoop them out. I use a combination of screwdrivers and some pliers. I think I got all of it out, so we should be good to go now. But boy, that wasn't fun. New rings right here. I believe Fisher and Plath makes these. Pretty easy to get your hands on and nice and cheap, so there's no reason not to change them. All I have to do now is put the valve cover back on with, of course, all of those new washers on the valve cover bolts. I might put some Loctite on them and just kind of hand tighten them slowly. And just like with the other stuff we've been doing, as long as they're pretty much snug, you're good to go. The crush washers on the bolts do the most work. These things are only about 9 Newton meters regardless, which is almost nothing. So you really want to be careful, not over tighten these bolts. And then we're gonna put the coils back and the respective bolts, and we should be all set. And I can confirm that that one longer bolt does go over here, It's pretty obvious just because there's a massive gap where there's no threads, so it makes more sense to go there. I put a new OEM oil cap on just for good measure. I'm not sure what brand the previous oil cap was, but it definitely was an OEM. So we should be all set in that front, and I'll probably do an oil change soon, not immediately, because I want the new oiler tubes to have any whatever metal fragments maybe on those that didn't get cleaned off. I want those to end up in the oil, so this way I can drain it all out and put new oil in without having to worry about it. This side should in theory be a bit easier just because you don't have that PCV plug over there. There is some stuff over here in the way, but nothing too bad really, just the fuel hose, but we can probably push that a little bit. If we need to take the fuel hose off, take the fuel hose off, not a big deal.
Later that night.
As you guys can see, this project was definitely successful. I did both sides of the camshaft oiler tubes along with the timing chain guides, and it works brilliantly. It's been working well for the last few thousand miles as well, and this M119 is now practically bulletproof, which is awesome. Please leave a like if you guys found this video helpful, and consider subscribing for more content like this.